Active listening as a phrase has been out there for so long. A friend of mine told me, probably about 2005, 6 or so, that it's been out there so long, a lot of people are claiming to teach it and they're doing a horrible job. And so it's, by and large, if you're advocating active listening, do you really understand what it means? Are you teaching it in a way that's accurate? So it's kind of like empathy. It's overdone. It's lost its meaning. What is it really? Well, it really should be proactive, anticipatory. We start with what anecdotally we've learned, how emotional intelligence works. Self-effacing humor is a form of empathy. If me walking into the lost luggage counter saying, I need you to wave a magic wand, it's effectively self-effacing humor. I'm kind of portraying myself as thinking I'm stupid enough to think you got a magic wand. It's humorous, it's playful. So that was the beginning of it. And then proactively, like now in the last 10 years now, 10 plus years, maybe almost 15, we have the information from neuroscience, which is a hard science. Psychology, soft science, tough science to go with when you're trying with very little hard data. It's all observational and speculative. Neuroscience, far less so. Well, what does neuroscience tell us about the brain? Basically, that the brain is about 75% negative. Survival mode is negative. Why? Because negative stuff will kill you, positive stuff won't. If you miss something negative once and it doesn't kill you, the second time it probably will. The old phrase, somebody who's been bit by a snake becomes afraid of ropes. That's the negativity in our brain, overreacting. Neuroscience tells us it's simply calling out negatives. Simply calling them out, not denying them, not calling them out in an accusatory way. Simply calling them out is the best way to deactivate them. It's not a guaranteed way, it's just the best chance of success. So knowing that the brain is negative, and the best way to deactivate negatives is to call them out. Instead of saying, I don't want you to think I'm being disrespectful, you can say, I'm going to sound disrespectful. That's the difference between the denial and calling it out in advance. That's really being proactive. And that's with anecdotal emotional intelligence combined with what neuroscience is showing us, you should be proactive because the brain is 75% negative.
Can you give us a high stakes situation where you've had to call out the emotion and how that's transformed the situation?
Well, and even calling it out in advance. When I took over the Bureau's operation as lead international kidnapping negotiator, which meant I came up with strategies in kidnappings overseas of American citizens that was most likely to get the hostage out and prevent the kidnapping from happening again. Simultaneously, two things. Get them out, save the hostage's life. And the best approach was really the bank robber approach. You give a teller bait money so the bank robber doesn't shoot the teller. But you don't give them the keys to the vault, you give them a small amount of marked money. Teller lives, bank robber leaves, the money becomes evidence. That's really the best way to approach kidnappings. Simultaneously, while I'm doing this, the President of the United States is saying the U.S. does not negotiate with terrorists. Well, there's a difference between negotiating with and negotiating against. There's an approach of using communication as a weapon to identify the other side, to gather data, to set them up. Sting operation, bank robbery, bank teller analogy. So what does that mean? Long answer to your question, calling out negatives. I show up in a U.S. embassy overseas and people in the embassy say, the U.S. doesn't negotiate with terrorists, what are you doing here? And knowing that I'm encountering resistance and negativity from the beginning, also because I'm the expert from headquarters. The expert from headquarters is never welcome with open arms because the people that you're showing up to help out view you as a threat, view you as, by definition, you're there because they're screwing up, which is one more reason why they don't like you. And I'm going to offer my thoughts, and I would start off by saying, this is going to sound harsh. And it would deactivate their feelings of negativity. I'd lay out what I wanted, what I thought they should do, and they would be like, oh, that's not harsh, that's just good advice. Now, if I laid out the advice, which is the first couple times I was in an embassy, without saying, this is going to sound harsh, the reaction was always negative. Like, we know what we're doing. We don't need headquarters, Washington, D.C. people coming here telling us how to do our job. First 2 or 3 times I was in embassies around the world, that was the reaction. And for whatever reason, one day, after about the 3rd or 4th time, I said, this is going to sound harsh. Suddenly they were open to hearing me, because it was going to sound harsh if I didn't warn them what was coming. And that became my method of operation in all my approaches. If I know something I'm getting ready to say based on my experience that you're not going to like, before I say it, I say, you're not going to like this. It's going to sound harsh. You're going to think I'm a jerk. You're going to think I'm disrespectful. All the things that are going to go through their mind. It becomes a ridiculously effective way to tell the truth.
Why does that work so well?
Well, I know what the brain mechanism, there's been several neuroscience experiments. Like, why does it work? I just know what works. They put people in fMRIs, functional magnetic resonance imaging devices. I'm told, kind of like a big helmet. It tracks the electrical activity in the brain. I'm also told it tracks blood flow in the brain. Regardless, either the blood flow or the electrical activity is hypothesized to show you how the brain is functioning. So they put people in fMRIs, they show them a picture that induces negative emotions in most people. I don't know what the pictures were. Could have been, somebody, a homeless person in the rain. Who knows? I don't know what it was. But I know the experiment has been done several times. And each time they showed them the photo, the portion of the brain anticipated to be correlate with negative emotions lights up. Certain portions of the amygdala, the hippocampus, they got crazy names for all these parts. And then they simply asked the people to label, to identify what they were feeling. So every single time that they identified, they called out, they labeled the feeling. Every time the electrical activity in that part of the brain diminished. So there's 2 really important components to that observation. Number 1, it happened every time. Number 2, the degree of impact varied. So you might call out a negative emotion and it might deactivate all the negative thinking. You might call it out and it might just only imperceptibly, in a very small way, deactivate it, which might mean you need to call it out 3 or 4 or 5 times. So it had the same type of impact every time. The degree of impact varied. Now, why that happened, there are certain dynamics we don't completely know why it's happening. We just know the mechanism is happening. And that's been demonstrated several times to be the case.
Hey there, Inspired Evolutionary. If you absolutely loved this, well then here's a full conversation with this guest on the Inspired Evolution podcast. Check it out now.